Stories of Futures Past presents 10 short stories, aka Flash Fiction, Volume 7. It's a Small Solar System by Allan Howard. Stellar Vengeance by Frank Freeman. Preferred Position by Dave Dryfoos. Survivors by Arthur Dekker Savage. Keep Out by Fredric Brown. Grim Green World by Roger D. The Masked World by Jack Williamson. Placebo by David Mason. The Scandalized Martians by Arnold Marmor. Mission by John Hollis Mason. It's a Small Solar System by Allan Howard, originally published in Fantastic Universe, September 1957. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Know him? Well, you might say I practically grew up with him. He was my hero in those days. I thought few wiser or greater men ever lived. In my eyes, he was greater than Babe Ruth, Lindy, or the President. Of course, time, and my growing up, caused me to bring him into a perspective that I felt to be more consonant with his true position in his field of endeavour. When he died, his friends mourned for fond remembrance of things past, but privately many of them felt that he had outlived his best days. Now, with this glorious vindication, I wonder how many of them are still alive to feel the twinge of conscience. Oh, we're delighted, of course, but it seems incredible even today to us elated oldsters. Although we were always his staunchest admirers, in retrospect we can see now that no one believed more than we that he did it strictly for the dollar. It is likely there was always a small core of starry-eyed adolescents who found the whole improbable saga entirely believable, or at least half believed it might be partly true. The attitude of the rest of us ranged from a patronizing disparagement that we thought was expected of us, through grudging admiration, to out-and-out enthusiasm. Certainly, if anybody had taken the trouble to consider it, and why should they have? The landing of the first manned ship on our satellite seemed to render him as obsolete as a horde of other lesser and even greater lights. At any rate, it was inevitable that the conquest of the moon would be merely a stepping stone to more distant points. Oh no, I had nothing to do with the selection of the Red Planet. Coming in as head of Project P4 in its latter stages, as I did when Dr. Fredric died, the selection had already been made. Yes, it's quite likely I may have been plugging for Mars below the conscious level. A combination of chance, expediency, and popular demand made Mars the next target, rather than Venus, which was, in some ways, the more logical goal. I would have given anything to have gone, but the metaphorical stout heart that one reporter once credited me with is not the same as an old man's actual fatty heart. And there were heartbreak years ahead before the Goddard was finally ready. During this time, he slipped further into obscurity while big, important things were happening all around us. You're right. That one really big creation of his is bigger than ever. It has passed into the language and meant employment for thousands of people. Too few of them have even heard of him. Of course, he was still known and welcomed by a small circle of acquaintances, but to the world at large he was truly a forgotten man. It is worthy of note that one of the oldest of these acquaintances was present at blast-off time. He happened to be the grandfather of the certain competent young crewman. The old man was a proud figure during the brief ceremonies, and his eyes filled with tears as the mighty rocket climbed straight up on its fiery tail. He remained there, gazing up at the sky long after it had vanished. He was heard to murmur, "I am glad the kid could go, but it is just a lark to him. He never had a sense of wonder. How could he? Nobody reads any more." Afterward, his senile emotions betraying him, he broke down completely and had to be led from the field. It is rumored he did not live long after that. The Goddard drove on until Mars filled the viz-screen. It was planned to make at least a half-dozen braking passes around the planet for observational purposes before the actual business of bringing the ship in for landfall began. As expected, the atmosphere proved to be thin. The speculated Dead Sea areas, oddly enough, turned out to be just that. To the surprise of some, it was soon evident that Mars possessed, or had possessed, a high civilization. The canali of Schiaparelli were indeed broad waterways stretching from pole to pole, too regular to be anything but the work of intelligence. But most wonderful of all were the scattered but fairly numerous large walled cities that dotted the world. Everybody was excited, eager to land and start exercising their specialties. One of the largest of these cities was selected more or less at random. It was decided to set down just outside, yet far enough from the walls to avoid any possibility of damage from the landing jets in the event the city was inhabited. Even if deserted, the entire scientific personnel would have raised a howl that would have been heard back on Earth if just a section of wall was scorched. When planetfall was completed and observers had time to scan the surroundings, it was seen that the city was very much alive. "What keeps them up?" marveled Kopchansky, the Aeronautics and Rocketry Authority. The sky swarmed with ships of strange design. The walls were crowded with inhabitants too far away for detailed observation. Even as they looked, an enormous gate opened and a procession of mounted figures emerged. In the event the place was deserted, the captain would have had the honor of being the first to touch Martian soil. While atmospheric and other checks were being run, he gave orders for the previously decided alternative. Captain, semanticist, and anthropologist would make the first contact. With all checks agreeing that it was safe to open locks, soon the three representatives of Earth were walking shoulder to shoulder down the ramp. It was apparent that the two scientists purposely missed stride inches from the end, so that it was the captain's foot that actually touched ground first. The cavalcade, though these beasties were certainly not horses, was now near enough to the ship for details to be seen. Surprise and wonderment filled the crew, for while the multi-legged steeds were as alien as anyone might expect to find on an alien world, the riders were very definitely humanoid. Briefly, brightly, and barbarically trapped as they were by earthly standards, they seemed to be little distinguishable from home-grown Homo sapes. The approaching company appeared to be armed mainly with swords and lances, but also in evidence were some tubular affairs that could very well be some sort of projectile discharging device. The captain suddenly felt unaccountably warm. It was a heavy responsibility. He hoped these Martians wouldn't be the type of madmen who believed in the shoot first, inquire later theory. Even as he stood there, outwardly calm but jittering internally, the Martian riders pulled up 10 feet from the Earthman. Their leader, tall, dark-haired, and subtly lighter in hue than his companions, dismounted and approached the captain. With outstretched hand he took the captain's in a firm grip. Let it be recorded here, to the shame of an Earth where reading for pleasure is virtually a lost pastime, that not one man on the Goddard realized the significance of what followed. "How do you do?" he said in perfect English, with an unmistakable trace of Southern accent. "Welcome to Barsoom. My name is John Carter."
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story. Stellar Vengeance by Frank Freeman. Originally published in Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy, February 1955. Narrated by Tom Trussel. "You must realize," squealed the squat, ugly creature in the hastily constructed wooden cage, "that you're inviting certain destruction by holding me prisoner. I warn you, your time is short." Walt Granger stomped over to the enclosure and swung a heavy boot against one of the 2x4s that stood like a crooked row of sentries. "That's my worry," he grunted. He had stumbled upon the whole business just 2 hours before, right in the middle of his part of the geological survey that was going on in the rock-strewn hills and gullies known on the maps as the Millsport Range. He had seen the ship the moment it left the ground, and a few yards from the burned circle of grass that was still smouldering from the rocket blast, there sat the fat little specimen of life from another world. Granger had caught the thing by surprise and had a rope around its middle before it could scamper into the brush. "My comrades will return for me," warned the thing, its yellowish eyes slowly and rhythmically protruding and withdrawing within their sockets. "They'll have no trouble finding you, and when they do—" "Shut up," snapped Granger, pulling on his leather jacket. He turned to the cement fireplace and gave the embers a poke with a charred stick, looking around at the cage every few seconds as though he feared leaving his back turned for more than an instant. He looked at his watch. 8 o'clock, and night was fast spreading a blanket of charcoal shadows over the hillside. He'd wait till morning to move this crazy beast to the next camp 6 miles away. A night trip might entail chances he wasn't willing to take. After a couple of nervous fumbles with a match, he lit a cigarette and glanced uneasily out the one window in the rough cabin. What if the alien, or whatever it was, wasn't kidding about the danger he was in? What if his buddies did decide to come back before morning with the extermination of a human on their minds? "Think of it, Granger," he told himself laconically. "You'd be a hero, a nice, cold, dead one. And they'd never find the bunch who'd have knocked him off. He'd be the one of those mysterious deaths the papers played up." "Free me immediately," screeched the angry captive, his head swaying like a balloon on a stick. "You haven't much time left." "You're a nasty-tempered little imp, aren't you?" growled Granger as he strode across the room and peeked curiously inside the crate. "I loathe you," growled the thing. "I have no intentions of deceiving you. This whole situation is simply a matter of pure logic so far as your plight is concerned." "You're forgetting," said Granger, his voice lacking a certain amount of its previous confidence, "that you're the one who's in a mess." "Only temporarily, you fool," raved the creature, jumping frantically up and down. "Look," he screamed, pointing a tiny hand toward the window over Granger's left shoulder. The geologist gasped as he shot a quick glance in the direction of the thing's outstretched arm. A pale green light had turned the surrounding land and sky into an eerie dawn that extended its weird phosphorescence into the cabin itself. And 200 yards from the cabin, in a small area relatively clear of major obstructions, was the same ship he had seen a few hours before. "They're here!" shouted the alien. "Let me out!" Granger slammed shut the door and lifted a massive oak bar into iron brackets on either side. Then he was at the window again. A hatch near the bottom of the craft was open, but there was no sign of movement. Then he saw one of them, an exact duplicate of his captive, running from bush to bush about 50 feet from the ship. A few steps behind him was another. 2 more nearby scrambled over an immense boulder and scurried into the brush. Another 5 were emerging, like a patrol of midgets, from a ravine to the north of the cabin. "Be sensible, you idiot!" snarled the thing in the crate. "I'm giving you this final chance. Unlock this contrivance, and all will be well with you. I'll speak on your behalf." "So you can lead your buddies right back here?" "Sure," said Granger. "That's all I'd have to do to finish myself off in a real hurry." "Do as I say!" yelled the alien. "For your own sake!" "Look," panted Granger. "I know I was crazy to fool with you in the first place, but now that you're here and they're outside, you're staying, see?" He reached under the lumpy pile of cotton that served as a mattress and pulled out his .30-30 rifle. Little boy blue and his pop gun, he thought. He grabbed a handful of cartridges from a box under the bed and began jamming them into the magazine. "That will be of no use, my friend," droned a hollow voice behind him. Granger spun himself around just as a pane of glass in the window flew to pieces under the impact of a short, shiny gun barrel. A perfect reproduction of the face of the creature in the cage centered itself in the jagged frame of the broken window and gave him the shadow of a smile that was closer to a victorious leer. "Put down your weapon," the newcomer ordered coldly. "Get that rifle up fast," Granger commanded himself. "I repeat," said the face at the window, "lower your weapon." "They'll let you have it anyway," Granger thought grimly. He slowly curled his finger around the trigger and started to move when he was jarred off his feet by a roaring blast that ripped the door from its hinges and sent it crashing against the rear wall of the cabin. Outside the ruined entrance stood a group of aliens, all armed. Fearfully, he looked to the window, but their leader was gone. In a second, he appeared at the door, moved inside the cabin, and Granger automatically stepped back, his hazy mind calculating roughly the few feet of escape route remaining to him. In a moment he was there, his back flattened against the cabin wall. The short creature kept coming on, its murky orbs fixed on Granger's white, drawn countenance. Then it stopped its advance. "So you have one of our people," it said in a voice that twanged like piano wire. Granger tried once in vain for his voice, then gave up. He stared over the head of his foe at the silent assembly outside the cabin, then at the thing in the packing crate. It was sitting there, quiet, immobile, but intently watching the scene between the Earthman and his visitor. "You are holding one of us captive," the commander remarked. "This is a most unfortunate situation indeed." The small figure stepped aside quickly and waved an arm. Granger, perspiration trickling down his face, watched a score of glistening weapons raised and pointed inside the cabin. For a second he looked directly at the menacing horde. Then his eyes saw nothing. A blazing flash of white light burst forth from the doorway, and it was all over. Granger forced open his aching eyes and squinted in the direction of the fiery blast, but the doorway was empty. The commander was still there, though, walking slowly to the door. "Why am I alive?" Granger asked himself incredulously. "Or am I dead?" He bumped his fist against his forehead once or twice and gave his head a vigorous shake. Suddenly he turned his gaze to the cage. But he saw nothing that resembled the rebuilt packing crate, only a mound of ashes and twisted spikes. In the centre of the heap, like a fat dwarvish king astride his fallen kingdom, was the charred, blackened shell of the grotesque creature that had once occupied the wooden cell. Then he moved cautiously toward the door and stared, speechless, at the leader of the expedition. "We shall depart now," said the being. "Thank you for helping us." Not much later, across the silent reaches of space, a communications operator on another planet looked up from his receiving equipment and handed his superior a message just transmitted from a ship leaving the planet Earth. "Return mission successful. Deserter located and executed."
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story.
Preferred Position by Dave Dryfoos. Originally published by Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy, April 1953. Narrated by Tom Trussel. The bed woke them. "Time to get up, dears," it cooed. "Time to get up and greet the sun. Time to get up." Then the supporting magnetism faded and let the mattress drift gently to the soft, warm floor. Janet turned and opened her eyes, pouting at Les. He scowled back, grumbled something, and rolled away. She shook his film-coated shoulder. "Come on, Les, come on. You'll feel better after coffee." "Don't want any," he snarled. But the damage had been done. At the word coffee, a grotesque marionette opened the bedroom door and minced in with 2 steaming cups on a tray, swinging them artfully so that it appeared likely to spill, but didn't. For some years now, that dance had left Janet unamused. She was about to say so when Les growled, "These darned dolls are a nuisance. I wish you'd order a plain automatic dispenser." "They're even more boring," Janet argued, sitting up. Her gauzy film dress and sleepy face made her look appealingly childlike. She was 55. Les was 60, with a full head of blonde hair atop 6.5 feet of slim, solid flesh. He sat up with the expression of an exasperated 6-year-old. "Go away," he told the doll. It did. "But I wanted some," Janet wailed. She was careful, though, not to use the word that would cause the doll to return. Neither did Les. He said, "Why don't we take a couple of pills and go back to sleep till tomorrow? There isn't a darn thing to do." "There never is," Janet said. Then, noting she'd inadvertently agreed with her husband, she quickly added, "But we can't sleep. We did that yesterday. If we don't move around, we'll practically stop eating, and anyway, the neighbours will miss us. First thing you know, we'll be accused of either a hunger strike or immobility. Then they'll enslave us for attempting suicide." She sniffed in self-pity at the thought. "Ah, honk 'em," Les said. "Slavery'd at least be a change, and slaves have something to do." "Don't talk nonsense," Janet said tartly. "You know perfectly well they always torture slaves." "Yeah, but I just can't face this any longer. I got 65 more years of longevity, according to the doctors, and they're never wrong, curse them. 65 more years without the possibility of illness, want, risk. Even an accident is unlikely. Nothing's going to happen in all that time. Jan, I just can't face it." "Isn't that just like a man?" she scoffed. "You know very well I've got 70 years to go. 5 still to wait before I can even have my first child. You're just being selfish." They glowered at each other. Then Les rubbed her cheek with the back of his hand and smiled. "Thanks, kid," he said. "You really had me going for a minute. Now I feel better." Pleased with the compliment, Janet concocted an extra fancy combination of films to spray on herself for the morning's wear. When it was in place, she ordered a large breakfast and arranged to have the waiter doll do a special dance routine while serving. But Les's smile had vanished with the whiskers he'd rubbed off. He'd picked at his food, turned his back on the dancing, and afterward yawned away the few minutes they spent on their apartment's terrace, stared at by 50,000 neighbours who lacked anything better to do. When Les wandered idly off, Janet followed. Les went to the living room, projected a book onto the ceiling, switched it off without reading, played with the glowing phosphors that lighted the room in colours he varied jarringly, fiddled with the console for the perfume aerosol, and created a stink, and then, in sheer despair, turned on the puppet set. Its lighted screen listed the necessary dolls and props, so we laid them out. Soon the 3-foot stage reflected a broadcast picture of the State Executive Office. A stringless, formally dressed puppet sat at a desk, its blank face a transmitted facsimile of the governor's. "The last time I can make this announcement," the governor was saying into a hidden microphone. "The tests are to begin at noon. Jobs are now open. I repeat, jobs are now open. Men only, of course. But if any of you fellows out there suffer from boredom, and who doesn't in this wonderful state of ours that by virtue of the new energy sources guarantees leisured security to each citizen, if, I repeat, you suffer from ennui, then why not apply for a job? Do it now. No further vacancies will occur for years, and we have some really desirable positions open this morning. Appointment will be made strictly on merit, as usual, with a job for every applicant and the best job for the top man. Though it's true that losers in this competition are required to assume for life the less desirable duties that our civilization imposes, I assure you that it isn't as bad as it sounds. I was pretty down the list in my day, yet I only have to be governor. So won't you please apply? I want a lot of competition." The stage darkened, and the puppet got up and walked to its box. Before the lights could go up on the next program, Les switched the set off. "What do you think?" he asked Janet. "I don't know," she said. "Nobody in my family has ever worked." "Mine either. But I once knew a fellow who tried for a job. He seemed okay to me, but he sure didn't get a good one. He had a clerical position with business machines, and their output was geared down to spread the work, so he didn't have enough to do. Just stacked punched cards or something every day for 80 years. "Oh, you do better than that, dear." "Maybe. Point is, there are jobs worse than no job at all." "I'm not so sure," Janet said, suddenly determined. "Only a few minutes ago you weren't very happy about the idle days ahead. Why not take a chance?" "Take a chance? What kind of language is that? Chance went out along with disease and poverty and crime and accidents. You're way off base, Jan." "But you have a chance. Oh, all right, an opportunity then, if you like that better, to get a good job. Now, if I were a man—" "But you're not. Still, maybe I'll try it." For the first time in a month or two, Janet kissed him warmly, and after she'd helped him into his wings and seen him off from the terrace, she felt a strange warm glow of anticipation. Not since she'd married had there been need for a decision that could bring change into her life. This was a day. It was a day for a lot of others, too. She learned that from the noon broadcast of the test ceremony. "In my time," the governor said, speaking from the Capitol's rotunda, "in my time 100 aspirants was considered a good turnout. Today's applicants total 1,000. We haven't actually got 1,000 jobs lined up, but we'll get 'em. And I'm privileged to announce, now that the list of competitors has closed, that we do have the astoundingly large number of 10, repeat, 10 genuinely desirable appointments to make." 10 good jobs for 1,000 applicants didn't sound to Janet like an astoundingly large number. She'd been sprawled out on a magnetically positioned pad halfway between floor and ceiling, but she sat up when the governor stopped talking, and with a twinge of genuine and unwanted anxiety watched the long file of applicants as they approached in turn the brain-wave analyzer, the voice-operated sorter that would add their live files to current test results, and the officials who judged each man's configuration. She wished they'd announce the test results publicly, but knew they wouldn't. So when Les had gone through, about 20 minutes after the start, Janet shut off the broadcast, dissolved her dress films, and had herself rubbed by the massage machine. The morning's suspense was proving too much for her, and she didn't want to have a headache when Les came home. But even the mechanical masseuse couldn't rub away her strange feelings. Not since marriage had Janet felt curiosity as to the future. What if he got so dull they never even argued about anything? She shivered at the thought. But then she smiled, and for the next hour Janet lay under the soothing massage and gave herself up to the delightful new pleasure of worrying. When Les returned, shadowing the terrace in his descent like some portentous bird, Janet began to shake. Without even waiting to kiss him, she said, "How was it? How did you do?" Les grinned teasingly. "Help me malt first," she said. "I'm tired." Unable to get anything else out of him until it was done, she tore his wings off damagingly, kissed him, and said, "Now won't you say something?" "I'm hungry." "No!" She danced her impatience like a little girl. "Tell me!" But even as she pouted, her eyes sparkled in anticipation. "I start tomorrow," he said. "Did you get the best job?" Nope, I really didn't." "What then?" "Second best." "Oh, wonderful! What is it?" "Rigger and high climber. Topping trees, setting structural iron, fixing flagpoles, that sort of things. Powderman was first." "Oh, Rigger's wonderful!" Visions of his future work flashed across her mind, implanted there by childhood hours spent watching other members of this elite profession at their thrilling work. She knew there could be broken cables, fallen pulleys, snapped booms, dropped loads. Every day would have its interesting possibilities. "My darling!" She threw her arms around him and was momentarily silenced by his kiss. Then she stepped back, looked admiringly up at him and said, "Oh, I'm so happy for you, and so proud. I'm going right in and order up a nice big meal. I know you'll enjoy this one. It really might be your last."
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story. Survivors by Arthur Dekker Savage. Originally published in Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy, May 1952. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Oluf, Bauron. They recognized each other simultaneously, there in the thin fringe of a tangled brush skirting a hidden lake. "Oluf, it's good to see you again. I thought there was nothing but mountains, wolves, and wild ones between me and civilization." They picked their way slowly toward the shore together. Oluf dropped gratefully to the warm sand. The sunset highlighted his reddish hair. "You're not far wrong. There was wolf spoor back on that north ridge. But what in the name of the moon are you doing so far from New York?" "Heading south to stay," Bauron said. He scanned the brush and trees behind them cautiously, then stretched out beside his companion, sighing. "I'm getting too old for the winters, and the canned foods in the ruins are getting scarcer every year." Oluf looked at him in disbelief. "You're travelling alone?" "Aren't you?" The retort was sharp, with a keen edge of elderly pride. Something like a weary chuckle sounded deep in Oluf's throat. He spoke with easy candour. "Yes, but look, Bauron, I'm a hunter by choice, and I'm big and in my prime. I can run half a day at top speed, and I'm not too bad in a free-for-all. You're a teacher, wise, but not in the way of the wild. Your senses are dull and your reactions slow, like all city folk." Bauron's eyes looked suddenly tired, older. He gazed out over the placid water. "I could persuade no one to accompany me," he said simply. "You made a good choice, Oluf, to terminate your education and seek the freedom in the wilds, the natural life that I think all must some day embrace." He sighed deeply. "Of course, there is the dream of achievement that the city dwellers entertain. We have grown soft in our dependence upon the buried food in the rubble,
spending our time in study of the books and other god things, always hoping that we can understand and duplicate the old civilization. But our best thinkers, since they are the most eager searchers, stumble most often into the hidden pockets of radioactivity that endure even yet, and they die, and their knowledge dies with them, and our dreams and aspirations become dimmer with each generation. Olaf grunted, and Bowron went on as though to himself. I've come to believe that it's useless to follow in the footsteps of the gods, that we must wait and think and work, each in his own way, until we learn what is possible for us through our own trials and the further development of our simple tools. We've learned much from the god things, slowly, over the years, but we also know that we're mutants, changed by the radiation of the great war areas, breeding true at last, and that we are different from the wild ones. True, we're superior, but we're not gods. Whether we can ever... Olaf had sprung to his feet and was gone with incredible speed. Bowron sat up tensely, listened to the crashing of brush, and, finally, to a shrill squeal of departing life. He relaxed, and waited until Olaf, grinning, returned with a rabbit. Our dinner, old-timer. Sorry I wasn't listening too closely to what you were saying. Later, after they had eaten and were stretched comfortably on the moon-drenched shore, Olaf grew reminiscent. I remember your teachings, Bowron, and I recall well our endless attempts to operate the god things, the machines and mechanisms, but all that always seemed strange. Best of all, I like the tales of the old days, the stories of our ancestors. Bowron nodded thoughtfully. It was that way with most of my pupils. It was more comfortable to dream of the past than to cope with the current hardships. It seemed to arouse some dormant instinct in all of us. He broke off and sighed. Would you like to hear another of the stories? Very much. Bowron studied the bright moon. Well, once in the far and long ago, there was a man named Smith who lived in a big city. When the tale was done, Olaf seemed deeply moved. I believe, he said slowly, that I'll go with you to the Southland. You might easily perish on the way, and such words as yours must live to give others comfort and hope, for we may yet find living gods in some remote corner of the world. It must have been wonderful, he mused sleepily, to have lived in companionship with the gods, with men. He curled up comfortably, paws tucked in, and laid his nose across his bushy tail.
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story.
Keep Out by Fredric Brown. Originally published in Amazing Stories, March 1954. Narrated by Tom Trussel. With no more room left on Earth, and with Mars hanging up there empty of life, somebody hit on the plan of starting a colony on the Red Planet. It meant changing the habits and physical structure of the immigrants, but that worked out fine. In fact, every possible factor was covered, except one of the flaws of human nature. Daptine is the secret of it. Adaptine, they called it first. Then it got shortened to Daptine. It let us adapt. They explained it all to us when we were 10 years old. I guess they thought we were too young to understand before then, although we knew a lot of it already. They told us just after we landed on Mars. "You're home, children," the head teacher told us after we had gone into the glassite dome they'd built for us there, and he told us there'd been a special lecture for us that evening, an important one that we must all attend. And that evening he told us the whole story and the whys and wherefores. He stood up before us. He had to wear a heated spacesuit and helmet, of course, because the temperature in the dome was uncomfortable for us, but already freezing cold for him, and the air was already too thin for him to breathe. His voice came to us by radio from inside his helmet. "Children," he said, "you are home. This is Mars, the planet on which you will spend the rest of your lives. You are Martians, the first Martians. You have lived 5 years on Earth and another 5 in space. Now you will spend 10 years until you are adults in this dome, although toward the end of that time you will be allowed to spend increasingly long periods outdoors. Then you will go forth and make your own homes, live your own lives as Martians. You will intermarry, and your children will breed true. They too will be Martians. It is time you were told the history of this great experiment of which each of you is part." Then he told us. Man, he said, had first reached Mars in 1985. It had been uninhabited by intelligent life. There is plenty of plant life and a few varieties of non-flying insects, and he had found it by terrestrial standards uninhabitable. Man could survive on Mars only by living inside glassite domes and wearing spacesuits when he went outside for them. Except by day in the warmer seasons, it was too cold for him. The air was too thin for him to breathe, and long exposure to sunlight, less filtered of rays harmful to him than on Earth because of the lesser atmosphere, could kill him. The plants were chemically alien to him, and he could not eat them. He had to bring all his food from Earth or grow it in hydroponic tanks. For 50 years he had tried to colonize Mars, and all his efforts had failed. Besides this dome, which had been built for us, there was only one other outpost, another glassite dome much smaller and less than a mile away. It had looked as though mankind could never spread to the other planets of the solar systems, besides Earth, for of all of them Mars was the least inhospitable. If he couldn't live here, then there was no use even trying to colonize the others. And then, in 2034, 30 years ago, a brilliant biochemist named Weymouth had discovered daptine, a miracle drug that worked not on the animal or person on whom it was given, but on the progeny he conceived during a limited period of time after inoculation. It gave his progeny almost limitless adaptability to changing conditions, provided the changes were made gradually. Dr. Weymouth had inoculated and then mated a pair of guinea pigs. They had borne a litter of 5, and by placing each member of the litter under different and gradually changing conditions, he had obtained amazing results. When they attained maturity, one of those guinea pigs was living comfortably at a temperature of 40 below 0 Fahrenheit. Another was quite happy at 150 above. A third was thriving on a diet that would have been deadly poison for an ordinary animal, and a fourth was contented under a constant X-ray bombardment that would have killed one of its parents within minutes. Subsequent experiments with many litters show that animals who had been adapted to similar conditions bred true, and their progeny was conditioned from birth to live under those conditions. 10 years later, 10 years ago, the head teacher told us, you children were born of parents carefully selected from those who volunteered for the experiment. And from birth you have been brought up under carefully controlled and gradually changing conditions. From the time you were born, the air you have breathed has been very gradually thinned and its oxygen content reduced. Your lungs have compensated by becoming much greater in capacity, which is why your chests are so much larger than those of your teachers and attendants. When you are fully mature and are breathing air like that of Mars, the difference will be even greater. Your bodies are growing fur to enable you to stand the increasing cold. You are comfortable now under conditions which would kill ordinary people quickly. Since you were 4 years old, your nurses and teachers have had to wear special protection to survive conditions that seem normal to you. In another 10 years, at maturity, you will be completely acclimated to Mars. Its air will be your air, its food plants your food. Its extremes of temperature will be easy for you to endure, and its median temperatures pleasant to you. Already, because of the 5 years we spent in space under gradually decreased gravitational pull, the gravity of Mars seems normal to you. It will be your planet, to live on and to populate. You are the children of Earth, but you are the first Martians. Of course, we had known a lot of those things already. The last year was the best. By then, the air inside the dome, except for the pressurized parts where our teachers and attendants live, were almost like that outside, and we were allowed out for increasingly long periods. It is good to be in the open. The last few months they relaxed segregation of the sexes so we could begin choosing mates, although they told us there is to be no marriage until after the final day, after our full clearance. Choosing was not difficult in my case. I had made my choice long since, and I'd felt sure that she felt the same way. I was right. Tomorrow is the day of our freedom. Tomorrow we will be Martians. The Martians. Tomorrow we shall take over the planet. Some among us are impatient, have been impatient for weeks now, but wiser counsel prevailed, and we are waiting. We have waited 20 years, and we can wait until the final day, and tomorrow is the final day. Tomorrow, at a signal, we will kill the teachers and the other Earthmen among us before we go forth. They do not suspect, so it will be easy. We have dissimulated for years now, and they do not know how we hate them. They do not know how disgusting and hideous we find them, with their ugly, misshapen bodies, so narrow-shouldered and tiny-chested, their weak, sibilant voices that need amplification to carry in a Martian air, and above all, their white, pasty, hairless skins. We shall kill them, and then we shall go and smash the other dome so all the Earthmen there will die too. If more Earthmen ever come to punish us, we can live and hide in the hills where they'll never find us, and if they try to build more domes here, we'll smash them. We want no more to do with Earth. This is our planet, and we want no aliens. Keep off.
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story.
Grim Green World by Roger D. Aycock, writing as John Starr. Originally published in Planet Stories, November 1951. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Y had 5 spaceships, each tested again and again right down to its tiniest rivet, started for the moon and ended up in hell. I lit the last cigarette I would ever smoke and took my airsuit out of the compartment under the control board. The 2-man cubicle was coffin cold even under the blast of sunlight pouring through the forward port, and the air smelled of stale tobacco and machine oil. Beside me, Charlie Costa's voice droned into the communicator, winging back 230,000 miles to the listening millions of Earth. "Our air is nearly gone," Charlie said. "We have about 12 minutes left for deceleration, but we'll never make landing. The Luna 5 is riddled like a sieve, spewing out heavy water fuel along with her air. It's a miracle that a chunk hasn't crashed through our fuel pile or the communicator, or through us. That's what blew up the first 4 ships we know now. If men ever reach the moon, they'll first have to develop some sort of armor that will turn this barrage of meteoric dust." I got my feet into the plastoid suit and pulled it on, letting the transparent headpiece dangle over one shoulder like a parka hood. Charlie watched me with his tight grin, waiting through the 3-second lag of time for Earth's answer. Some high-ranking general down there had pushed aside the Moon Foundation scientists to make himself heard. His voice came over the hiss of static with a tinny, frantic ring. "Meteoric dust couldn't possibly pierce that alloy hull. It was tested over and over." We waited him out, knowing that his frenzy was not for us nor for the success of space flight. He was concerned, like all the military, only with the establishing of a moon base to overlook Earth, an all-commanding launching site that would control a world. Once that base was established, the ferment of war would come to a bitter end. One nation would own the planet. "But you didn't test the hull out here," Charlie said patiently when the general had finished. "You can't imagine the speed of these particles, with no protecting atmosphere to vaporize them as Earth has, and they streak through the ship so fast that they seem to strike both sides of the hull at once. I'm cutting you over to Leonard Nugent now. Ready, Len?" It was what I was waiting for. I had looked forward to this moment every day of the 9 years I had spent being groomed for the flight, and for half a lifetime of drilling before that. The waiting was almost over. "I'm ready," I said, and took the microphone. "But there's not much point in reporting further, is there? With her fuel leaks, the Luna 5 will go like an A-bomb the instant we try to use landing jets, just as the first 4 Lunas did. The air is getting thinner, so thin that I'll have to put on my pressure suit soon. Are there any questions?" My only answer was the grind and roar of static. I could guess why. They were bickering and quarrelling among themselves down there, the military men snarling at the scientists, and the scientists snarling back, each blaming the other for this new failure. The loss of the first 4 ships had been a mystery until they sent the Luna 5 out with co-pilots, equipped for full 2-way communication. Charlie and I had reported from the beginning of the flight in alternate 30-minute relays, keeping the Foundation posted, so that if anything threatened us, they would know the nature of the danger. Now they were getting what they asked for, and the problem would keep them busy for another 10 or 15 years while the conquest of space marked time. But they couldn't accept even temporary defeat calmly, of course. They had to quarrel among themselves, just as men have quarrelled since the first climbed down out of their trees and set about organizing the business of killing each other. "We're going to try for a landing anyway," I said into the microphone. "We're going to cut in the decelerator jets as soon as we pass out of the sun glare and into the moon's penumbra, where we can see." We flashed suddenly into darkness, lost instantly in the vast conical shadow of the moon. The night half of the pocked globe loomed below, faint and ghostly in the blue earth-shine, craggy and desolate, cold as space and as old as time. Earth hung above and behind us, and I couldn't help thinking of the astronomers who had followed up flight patiently every inch of the way. They couldn't see us now. The daylight crescent of the moon lay between the Luna 5 and the sun, burying us deep in the utter darkness of space. Charlie took the microphone, speaking this time not to the Foundation but to the millions who sat gaping at their radios. Some of them would be muttering maudlin prayers for our safety. Some would be gleefully collecting the bets they had made on our chances of getting across. All of them would be thrilled to the core by the vicarious imminence of danger and death. "We don't want mourning and demonstrations," Charlie said. "If you people listening to me would like to honor our memory and the memory of the men lost before us, then forget space travel for a while and try to work out a lasting peace down there on Earth. Because it's inevitable that you'll conquer space someday, and if you aren't ready for it when it comes—" He clicked off the communicator, and we turned to the port together to watch the little metal sphere that hurtled up out of the darkness past the Luna 5. From behind and above us there came a great white flash of atomic fire that must have blinded for the moment every watching eye on Earth. "Right on schedule," Charlie said, and swung the Luna 5 over the dark side rim and across the mysterious other side of the moon, the hidden hemisphere that no man has ever seen. The ship was waiting for us there, a sleek, familiar cylinder with airlock standing open. We went inside and closed the lock and stripped off our cumbersome air suits, and Charlie flexed his arms and grinned at me. Lord, I'm glad to get that over with. It's been like 9 years of prison. It was worth it, I said. I was remembering the grim green world we had left, shivering a little when I considered the brawling simian hordes who had battered their way up the scale toward a culture that might, unchecked, someday rule the universe. It gives us a few more years before they come swarming down on us with their atomic bombs and politics and their gaping tourists, I said, still using the speech patterns that had been drilled into me for half my life. We've marked time long enough, hoping for the best. We'll need every minute we've gained to get ready for them. We went forward then to watch the purple-skinned pilot, hairy and many-limbed and beautifully wrinkled, engage the magnetic drive that would send us flashing toward the planet that was home. Later, in our natural bodies, we would speak the name of that world with reverence, but our clumsy synthetic earth tongues could not master its lovely sonic extensions, and so we used another term. For the time being, we called it Mars.
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story.
The Masked World by Jack Williamson, originally published in Worlds of Tomorrow, October 1963. Narrated by Tom Trussel. The planet wore a mask. At 10 million miles it was a sullen yellow eye. At 1 million, a scarred and evil leer. Outside the smoking circle our landing jets had sterilized, it was a hideous veil of hairy black tentacles and huge sallow blooms hiding the riddle of its sinister genes. On most worlds that we astronauts had found, the life is vaguely like our own. Similar nucleotides are linked along similar helical chains of DNA, carrying similar genetic messages. A similar process replicates the chains when the cells divide to carry the complex blueprints for a particular root or eye or wing accurately down across 10,000 generations. But even the genes were different here, enormously complicated. Here the simplest seeming weed had more and longer chains of DNA than anything we had seen before. What was their message? We had come to read it with a new genetic microprobe. 100 precious tons of microscopic electronic gear. It was designed to observe and manipulate the smallest units of life. It could reach even those strange genes. That was our mission. Ours was the 7th survey ship to approach the planet. 6 before us had been lost without trace. We were to find out why. Our pilot was Lance Clandark, a lean, hard man, silent and as cold as the grey-cased microprobe. We hated him until someone learned why he had volunteered to come. His wife had been pilot of the ship before us. When we knew that, we began to hear the hidden tension in his tired voice, monotonously calling on every band. "Come in, 6. Come in, 6. 6 never came in. For 2 days we watched the planet, the shallow ditch our jets had dug, the charred stumps, the jungle beyond, the visible mask of those monstrous genes, rank, dark, utterly alien. At the 3rd dawn, Lance Clandark took 2 of us out in a copter. Flying a grid over the landing area, we mapped 6 shallow pockmarks on that scowling wilderness where our ships must have landed. We dropped into the newest crater, where black stumps jutted like broken teeth out of queerly bare red muck. A yellow scummed stream oozed across it. By the stream we found a fine-boned human skeleton. A nightmare plant stood guard beside the bones. Its thick leaves were strangely streaked, twisted with vegetable agony, half poisoned spine and half blighted bloom. Shapeless blobs of rotting fruit were falling from it over those slender bones. Lance Clandark stood up. Her turquoise Thunderbird. He showed us the bit of black and silver and blue veined stone. Back on Terra, back when we were student pilots, we bought it from an Indian in an old town called Santa Fe. He bent again. Lilith, he whispered. Lilith, what killed you? We found no other bones, nothing even to tell us what force or poison kept the creeping jungle back from that solitary plant. We left at dusk. Tenderly, Lance Clandark brought the gathered bones. Carefully we carried a few leaves and dried pods from that crazy sentinel plant. We found no other clue. Patiently, day by 40-hour day, we searched the other sites. We found jet marks and stumps and teeming weeds, but nothing like that tormented nightmare over Lilith Clandark's skeleton. We found no wreckage, nothing to show how the planet had murdered the lost expeditions. Day by eternal day, the unknown leered from the secret places of its genes. It was all vegetable. We saw no animal movement, heard no cry or insect hum. The silence became suffocating. Day after desperate day, we returned to the microprobe. The answer's in the genes, Lance Clandark whispered grimly. We've no other chance. He kept the probe running on the strangest genes of all, those from the plant nightmare that had grown beside his wife. They were like nothing else on this planet. The double-stranded chains of DNA were monstrously long. Many of the nucleotide links held copper or arsenic atoms. Queer, Lance kept muttering. No copper or arsenic in other plants here. I'd like to know why. He was running when we heard the woman scream. In that stifling quiet, her cry unnerved us all. We crowded down to the lock. Tattered, stained with blood-colored juices, she slipped through those coiled, constricting creepers. She splashed out into the open ditch, waving a filthy rag. Halfway to the ship, she fell into the mud. Lance Clandark led 3 of us to bring her in. She whimpered and looked up. Tears streaked the grime on her wasted face. "Lance," she gasped, "my dear." "Lilith," but he shrank back suddenly. "I found Lilith dead." "I am nearly dead." She tried weakly to get up. "You see, we're all marooned out there in the bush. Emergency landing. When we tried to get off, wrecked our astrogation gear. Need your spare astropilot." "Back," he swung on us. "Back aboard." "What's wrong?" We were stunned. "She's your wife. Aboard, instanter." We obeyed his deadly voice. "Help," she whispered faintly behind us in the mud. "Survivors. Need astropilot to plot our way home." The clanging lock cut off her voice. Angrily we turned on Lance Clandark. "Hold it," he snapped. "I'm not crazy. The planet is. Come along to the microprobe. I'm probing a seed from the plant we found by Lilith's bones. It puzzled me. So much of it was—" In spite of the tension, he had to grope for a word to express meaning. "Arbitrary. Those shapeless leaves, twisted stalk, that sterile seed. The copper and arsenic in those needless links. Too many genes had no function, no use at all. I just got the key when that thing screamed. The copper and arsenic atoms are not genetic instructions to the plant. They're a message to us, words replicated 1 trillion times and concealed in every cell of the plant." "Words?" someone whispered blankly. "Words in the atoms?" "Written in binary code." His scowl was bleakly triumphant. "That weed's a mutant, you see. The real Lilith formed the first cell with her microprobe. She left it, I suppose in her own body, as a message that no pseudo-Lilith could intercept." Outside that something screamed again. "Call each copper atom a dot," he whispered. "Call each arsenic a dash. Taken in order along the change of DNA, they do encode a message. The computer's decoding it now." He punched a button, and the printer whirred. "To whoever comes, Give no aid to anyone. Get off this planet. Its life is pseudomorphic. Don't let it leave. Just take my love to Lance Clandark, from Lilith, his wife, and get off this planet fast." Outside it uttered a frantic, bubbling screech. We did get off the planet, and we expect to stay away.
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story.
Placebo by David Mason. Originally published in Infinity Science Fiction, November 1955. Narrated by Tom Trussel. Each 1955 was worse than the last. The object appeared in the middle of Main Way, about 50 feet from the statue of Vachel Lindsay, at least 100 from anything else. It was much too big and complicated to have been hidden anywhere, and it hadn't any wheels, tracks, wings, or other visible means of movement. Corrigan, looking the object over, decided that it could not have come from any logical place in the world. Not being prejudiced, he then thought a little about the illogical places, and the places that weren't in the world. Corrigan decided that it must have been another attempt at time travel, and he clucked his tongue sympathetically. Well, someone had to break the news. Corrigan arose from the grass and walked toward the object. There was a young man sitting in the object, on a sort of high saddle. He looked a little wild-eyed, and he seemed to be talking to himself as he pulled and twisted at the rows of controls in front of him. Corrigan, looking up at him, decided that he couldn't be very healthy, and that the stiff grey garments he wore must be extremely uncomfortable. "Greetings, traveller," Corrigan called. "You're speaking English!" the young man exclaimed. "Good! Maybe I can get some help here. What year is this?" 1955 by most systems." The young man turned a little paler. "I just left 1955, he said unhappily. 4 times, in fact. 4 different 1955s, and each one's a bit worse. Now the machine won't work." "Your theory's wrong," Corrigan said calmly. "Hasn't it occurred to you yet that time travel might be impossible?" The young man made a choked sound. He began to climb down from his perch, keeping his eyes fixed suspiciously on Corrigan as he did so. He saw Corrigan as a small brown man, dressed in loose blue trousers, barefooted, and with a puff of white hair that seemed never to have been properly cut. The lawns and grassy roads, the bright and impermanent-looking buildings, and Corrigan himself, all added up to one thing in the young man's mind. "You're wrong," Corrigan said. "I'm not a lunatic, and this isn't an asylum. We don't have them." The young man on the ground now stared at Corrigan in evident horror. "Mind-reading?" "More or less," Corrigan said. "It saves time. For instance, you're Darwin Lenner, and you'd like very much to get back to wherever you started from. In fact, you have to, or something unpleasant might happen to you by your standards." "I'll be absent without permission," Lenner admitted. I wish you wouldn't do that." "Only when absolutely necessary," Corrigan smiled. "I'm a philosopher by trade myself, not a mind-reader. My name's Philip Corrigan, and I'll be very glad to help you on your way. But I think it might be a little difficult. We aren't really a very mechanically minded people here." Lenner ran his hands through his hair. "I've got to get back. Isn't there anybody who knows something about time machines?" Corrigan had been thinking swiftly. He had also been carrying on a conversation which Lenner could not possibly hear with a man who was several miles away. "Burwell, he wants to go home." "Fine, he ought to. Why doesn't he?" "He lost his confidence. He thinks his machine's broken down." "That kind, eh? I suppose the thing never really did work very well." "Most of them don't. They go travelling around hit or miss through probability under the operator's own mental stream. But this fellow probably comes from a world where an idea like that's illegal." Sounds like it. Corrigan, take him on a guided tour or something, and keep him busy. I'll be over as soon as I can. I'm going to do something for his self-confidence. Here's the story to give him. Corrigan had always enjoyed conducting guided tours, and he was enjoying this one especially well. He had a slightly wicked taste for complicated teasing, and Lena was a perfect object. He had evidently come from one of the more unpleasant probabilities, a world full of complex rules and harshly restrictive. Anything that he saw bothered him. The handsome girls, wearing unstrategically placed flowers and very little else, the flocks of children, as plentiful as pigeons and apparently as free of supervision, the almost total absence of anybody actually performing useful work. All of it contributed to Lena's increasing nervousness. The guided tour went in a wide circle, and Lena and Corrigan wound up sitting in a tavern facing on Mainway. Lena ignored the green drink before him and peered unhappily out the big window toward his machine. "Where is that friend of yours?" he asked for the 5th time. "He'll be here," Corrigan assured him. "Why hurry? Don't you like it here?" Lena's mouth hardened. He looked around him and shook his head. "No." He spoke almost apologetically. "I'm sorry. Well, look, old fellow, no hard feelings, I hope, but this world of yours is primitive. Degenerate, I'd say." "Primitive?" "No laws, not even morals. Those girls. And, of course, you don't have any civilized advantages, not even ground transportation. That man you spoke of has to walk here, and that's something else I don't understand. You say he's another time traveller." "Probability traveller, actually," Corrigan corrected. "All right, probability. Why does he stay here? Why would a really intelligent man give up civilization?" "Well, you know how it is. He's gone native, you might say. Life among the lotus-eaters and all that. Might happen to anybody, even yourself." Lena shuddered. "It's all right, though," Corrigan continued. "He'll be here any minute, and I'm sure he'll be able to help. Knows all there is to know about these machines. In fact, here he comes now." Burwell entered, and Corrigan could hardly suppress a small chuckle. Burwell had picked up Lena's ideas about what a man of intelligence and authority ought to look like, and had gone to some trouble to look the part. He was wearing a uniform of some sort, spectacles, and an expression of extreme wisdom. "I'm sure I can repair what's wrong," Burwell told Lena. "Let's go and look at your machine." Arriving, Burwell climbed over the mechanism with an air of bored ability, occasionally thumping at something, adjusting something else, or hitting a part with the tool until it rang. He muttered to himself as he worked, allowing the sound of his musings to drift in Lena's directions. Badly twisted impeller. The varish is more or less waffled. Let's see if... there we are." He climbed down and solemnly shook hands with Lena. "Fine machine you've got there, my boy. It'll take you back to your own place quite easily now. There wasn't a thing wrong except the drift crotch. However, I wouldn't use it again if I were you. There's no real control on these things. A man could end up anywhere. And, of course, you'd never find your way back here without control." "Well, thanks," Lena said doubtfully. He glanced around. "It's a shame there's no way we could regularly communicate between our worlds. There's a lot we could do for this one." "I'm sure of that," Burwell said, hastily looking away. "But it isn't worth the danger and difficulty of reaching us. For myself, it doesn't matter any more." He assumed a nobly tragic expression. "But you are young. You've got your life ahead of you. Your state and your society need you. I'm glad to help you on your way." Lena mounted the machine, and Burwell beamed a thought at Corrigan. "I've convinced him that the thing works, and that it would not be easy to come back. Actually, that machine of his is a real work of art. It doesn't do a damn thing. This boy comes from a place where they have to have a mechanical crutch for everything. His gadgets are pink pill stuff. Something to convince him he can do things he could do anyway. All we have to do now is give him a small mental shove to help him along, and he'll be home in no time. All right now, shove." Corrigan and Burwell shoved. Lena and his machine faded and were gone, leaving only a flattened place on the grass. "Brr," Burwell said. "Am I glad that worked? If he'd stayed another week or so, we would have to have our first lunatic of the century." "Or worse," Corrigan said, stirring the grass with his toes. "Did you get what he was thinking about when he talked about his world and ours getting into touch and civilizing us?" "I got it all right," Burwell said. "The fellow's mind was a swamp, a real primitive, and just like any other primitive, all he needed was a placebo from a witch doctor. Me in my savage regalia. Just let me get this thing with the glass in it off my nose, and these button things opened up a bit, and we can get on with that chess game. I hope the next traveller picks somewhere else to land, though. I've never felt so silly in my life."
The end. Subscribe for more at storiesoffuturespast.substack.com. And now for the next story.
The Scandalized Martians by Arnold Marmor. Originally published in Imagination Stories of Science and Fantasy, June 1954. Narrated by Tom Trussel. David Fry wanted to make an epic movie in the realistic school. The trouble was, his ideas wouldn't pass the censors, here or anyplace else. David Fry was a realist, and also slightly crazy. Maybe that helped in this buggy business, but David Fry overdid it. "I want her nude!" he screamed. "Naked!" "Impossible," I informed him as calmly as I could. "Naked!" he bellowed. "The Breen office won't allow it, and you know it." "I defy them, those radicals. It'll be my most realistic picture, a milestone in filmmaking." "It won't get the seal of approval." "So what? I don't need it." "Every state will ban it." "Nevada won't ban it." "Besides, you couldn't get Harriet Desmond to strut around in the Raw." "Oh, no?" "No." "Her option comes up in 3 months." "So what? You're a director. You have nothing to do with it. That's Dwight Howard's department. Look, David, I'll have her in a slip or a bathing suit." "Ronnie," he said, shaking his head, "I like you. You're a writer, but I like you anyway. I feel that the audience will get the proper impact only if she's naked." "It'll be an impact, all right." "You write the script the way I tell you. I don't want to argue anymore. I like you, Ronnie." "If you want a sexy script, I'll make it sexy without being lewd." "Sexy? Don't be vulgar. I want a down-to-earth picture like the French and Italians make. I want to surpass them with my realism." "David, what good would it do if I did write the scenario your way? The scene would never be shot." "Enough!" he screamed. He clutched his chest. "I feel an attack coming on. Leave me. Get out." Dwight Howard was chief production man at Silver Studios. He listened gravely as I spilled my heart out to him. "He's a great director," Dwight Howard said. He was a large man with tiny ears, liquid blue eyes, and the cigars he smoked cost $1 a stogie. "Sure," I said. "A great goofy director. He's nuts, just like all directors." He grinned at me. "Directors believe all writers are crazy, and writers believe all directors are crazy." "You want me to write the script his way? You want that scene shot with Harriet Desmond nude?" No, of course not. The whole idea is too ridiculous for words." He sighed. "I'll have a talk with him." David Fry resigned the following day. Tortured and abused actors and actresses celebrated for 3 days and 3 nights. Dwight Howard didn't have to accept the resignation, as Fry was bound to Silver Studios by an ironclad contract. But a director's work gets sloppy if his heart isn't in it. So out went David Fry, the realist. Nobody in Hollywood heard from Fry in 7 months, and nobody seemed to care. One night, as I came home from a party, I was greeted by the screaming of the telephone. I held the receiver to my ear. "Maternity hospital," I said. "Ronnie!" It was David Fry. "Oh, hello. How's everything?" "Fine. Great. I got to see you." "Well, I'll hop right over." He hung up, and I sighed. I built myself a solid drink and got comfortable. He showed up 20 minutes later. He was thinner, more nervous than before. He flopped on a divan. "You wouldn't believe it," he said. Believe what? I want to do a picture, a science picture about a trip to Mars. It's been done, and more than once. With real Martians? I blinked. I'll get you a drink. No, I want a clear head. Hear me out. I've met them. Who? Martians. A whole gang of them. Real honest-to-goodness Martians. It's fantastic, but it's true. They landed in the San Fernando Valley. That figures. I got my home there. They asked for directions to Hollywood. You know what? They came to revolutionize the industry. Maybe they're commies. You should see their equipment. Fantastic. I talked them into staying over at my place. They dismantled their ship and have it stored away. I want you to do the screenplay. It'll be great. They, weren't detected flying over? They use an anti-radar beam. Oh, they can speak every language under the sun. Look, David, I'm tired and I want to go to bed, so be nice and go sober up. You don't believe me? No. In plain language, no. He extracted a square-shaped box from a pocket. See this gadget? I can make myself disappear. Do that. And he did. Yo! I screamed. He reappeared. I staggered to the liquor cabinet and made myself a double-triple whiskey and soda. Well? There was a look of triumph on his face. They give you that? A present. I've got nothing doing for a week. I'll be there tomorrow morning. No, tonight. You're liable to blab about it. Don't you trust me? No. I know you went to see Dwight Howard about me. Then why do you want me to write the story? I feel you owe me that. You're honest in some ways. Well? Right, I'll pack a grip if I'm staying over. Do that. I've got my car downstairs. David Fry's home was a Spanish-style ranch which consisted of a herd of cattle and horses. The Martians looked like us, except they had no necks and no finger or toenails. Their leader was a giant of a Martian with the name Duma. They wore slacks and sports jackets which Fry had bought for them. They seemed pleasant enough. I got some sleep and woke that afternoon. Duma, Fry, and myself sat in the front room and talked over the story we were to do. We can't trust anyone, Fry said, so you and I will play the Earthlings in it. We'll land on Mars and discover life on the planet. Duma and his crew will play the Martians, real typecasting. What about sets? I asked. Plenty of background on Mars, Duma said. What? I exploded. Sure, Fry said. We'll go to Mars and shoot most of the picture there. Has anyone ever done that before? Sure, Duma said. I meant anyone on Earth, Fry said. I don't like it, I said. We'll bring you back, Duma said. I still don't like it. And we'll do that nude scene, Fry said. We'll have a couple of Martian girls taking a bath nude. Oh no, Duma said. That's out. But why? Fry wanted to know. The Martian censors. They won't go for it. I grinned. There too. But I want to film life in the raw, Fry said. Duma shook his head. Out of the question. We'll do it my way, Fry snarled, or we won't do it at all. Duma stood up. Well, if that's the way you feel about... Now wait a minute, I said. Hold on. David, we got a great thing here. Don't mess it up. I'm the director, Fry screamed. Nobody's going to tell me my business. Is everybody in Hollywood like him? Duma asked me. Some of them are worse. I realize we have made a grave mistake. I made the mistake of taking you into my home, Fry shouted. I treated you like human beings, and this is the thanks I get? I won't hear another word. Duma turned and marched out. Now see what you've done. I was as mad as a wet hen. What have I done? All I wanted to do was make a great picture. You insulted him. Why, he's liable to go back to Mars and talk them into invading us. That idiot! What does he know about making pictures? Activity brought me to the window. I looked out and saw the Martians putting their ship together. Fry came up behind me. The ship blasted off, and the Martians went back home. "They were hammy actors anyway," Fry rationalized.
Mission by John Hollis Mason. Originally published in Science Fiction Quarterly, Spring 1942. Narrated by Tom Trussel. The cylinder stood on the edge of a grassy plain. It was enveloped in a shimmering nimbus of golden brilliance. Lying grotesquely crumpled before the cylinder was a strange alien figure, unmoving. A little distance away was another figure, also crumpled and still, but more human-like in appearance. 50 yards beyond began a deep forest. Aside from the occasional murmuring breeze that rustled the grass, there was no sound or movement to disturb the tableau, and the stillness made it all the more mysterious. Cry landed on the edge of the forest. His search for intelligent life had been unfruitful up to now, but as he passed over the forest he had seen what he was looking for, a village of tree-dwellers. Equipping himself with a portable pressure projector, Cry let himself out through the airlock and stepped for the first time to the surface of Earth. The airlock's outer seal, a cumbrous affair over 3 feet thick, swung automatically back into place behind him, and as it did, a shimmering nimbus of brilliant golden light enveloped the spaceship. Cry experienced some difficulty in accustoming himself to the heavier gravitational pull of the new planet at first, but this was short-lived. As he moved over the plain toward the forest, Cry cut a strange figure. He was small and squat, barely 4 feet high, his body triangular-shaped and tapering to a truncated point at the top. 3 thin tentacular legs supported the trunk and provided locomotion. 4 equally thin and powerful appendages were attached to the upper part of the trunk, 2 on the chest, and 1 on each side of the hardly visible head. Each of Cry's 2 large eyes was embedded in the end of a foot-long stalk, giving him highly maneuverable and easily concentrated vision in all directions. Several spiracles dotted the lower part of the head, on each side of which was a huge ear, nature's answer to the problem of his own world's thin atmosphere. In the denser air of the earth, these latter proved very useful, if a trifle disconcerting with their powers of magnification. He could distinguish the slightest sounds at tremendous distances, the patter of an animal's feet deep in the forest, the noise of a falling branch. In places, the forest was quite thick and the going sometimes difficult, but for the most part the journey was uneventful. Presently he began to catch the sounds of movement and voices. Cry approached warily. He realized that these people were still very primitive, had not even begun to walk on the ground. Up to now he had exercised overmuch caution because he hadn't known what to expect, but now he knew there was nothing to fear. Detaching his pressure projector from the equipment secured to his back, Cry advanced on the alert. His job was by no means an easy one, despite the fact that everything seemed to be working in with his plans. If he were discovered, disaster could still wreck those self-same plans. He paused. Through the concealing foliage, he looked out upon a small clearing. In the trees surrounding this were the houses of the arboreal community, and singly and in groups, chattering gibberish to each other, its inhabitants. They were outlandish-looking beings to Cry, monstrous as he would have been to them, nearly twice as tall as he, and powerful with the strength of the brute. Few of them wore any covering, but the plentiful hair on their bodies seemed to be ample covering of itself. Communications was carried on with a combination of grunts and gestures, and as far as Cry could make out, the articulate part was very limited in meaning, almost incomprehensible to an intelligent mind. So far they hadn't detected the presence of another, but the alien knew he must not tarry. Moving into the shelter of two thick tree boles, Cry brought his pressure projector into play. The large communal house suddenly appeared to smash in upon itself, as though crushed by a giant hand. Screams of agony issued from the splintered walls as it crashed to earth. The tree-dwellers stopped everything they were doing to gaze in stupefaction at this prodigy. But before they could voice their amazement, another structure shattered under the emanation from the pressure projector. As the ray was invisible, it appeared to the thunderstruck denizens as though some angry unseen demon were venting his displeasure upon the village. Instinctively, a large crowd banded together for mutual protection. This was what Cry had been waiting for. They were annihilated. Those who still lived fled. But Cry's implacable destruction sought them out, and none got far before they were caught. When the alien emerged from his place of concealment, all that remained of the village was a few heaps of shattered pulp. He had done his job well. As Cry retraced his steps through the forest, his thoughts were far away. They reached back across the millions of miles of emptiness he had traversed to come here, back to his own people. They had been doomed, extinction facing them from overpopulation and lack of water. Mars was nearing the end, and its mighty race seemed about to share the fate of their planet, when a ray of hope came to them. The long-forgotten secret of interplanetary travel had been rediscovered. It was as a straw to the dying man. And Mars clutched at it. A small space rocket was built with all speed. Earth, long-eyed with anticipation by believers in the practicality of flight between the worlds, was chosen as the objective. Cry, an acknowledged expert in atmospheric travel and the problems confronting a space traveler, found himself selected to make the voyage. His job was to discover whether the Earth was suitable for Martian settlement, or if it could be made so. Astronomical observation had made this fairly certain, however, and that part of his task was merely one of confirmation. But he was also to ascertain whether there were any intelligent life upon the world. If this proved to be the case, and the opportunity presented itself, he was to wipe it out. It was ruthless, of course, but the Martians were facing death themselves and had to be ruthless. They couldn't take a chance on being attacked by Earth's inhabitants before they were accustomed to the new conditions and could fight back without being at a disadvantage. The Martian felt a deep satisfaction as he made his way back to his spaceship. There might still remain much to be done, but there was no doubt in his mind about the future now. A bright future and long, new life for Mars. But Cry might have felt very differently had he seen the hate-filled eyes that pursued his retreating figure. One of the brute men of the arboreal community had been absent on a private hunting expedition when the Martian began hostilities, only returning in time to see the demon, as Cry appeared to the savage mind, leaving the scene of destruction. The tree-dweller's first thought was of his mate, but prudence dictated that he remain concealed till the retreating form of the demon disappeared among the trees. Then he searched frantically for his mate. Eventually he found her, crushed among the splinters of their tree-house. A terrible, burning hate took hold of the savage. An all-consuming hate overcame his instinctive fear of the demon thing he had seen. Thoughts of revenge crowded all else from his mind. Then, With quick resolve, the tree man took to the trees in pursuit of the demon. His hyper-sharp sense of smell soon enabled him to pick up the trail of his quarry. Presently the forest began to thin out, giving way to open plain. Nearing the edge of the trees, the eagle eyes detected movement. Then the grotesquely alien figure of the demon thing came into view. Cry was in the open now. With a spurt of speed, accelerated by white-hot hate, the pursuer reached the edge of the forest. Too late. The Martian was nearly to his ship. Another moment and he would be safe. The brute man hated the ground and feared the incredible powers of the demon thing too much to risk physical combat. There was only one chance. Whipping a huge, jagged-edged stone from his girdle, the tree-dweller hurled it with all the energy of his tremendous thews. With deadly accuracy, the stone shot through the air. Cry never knew what hit him. His brain case was shattered like an eggshell. He dropped in his tracks. His desire for revenge satisfied, the tree-dweller began to comprehend the magnitude of his feat. Single-handed, he had killed the demon thing that destroyed his people. For a moment he was a little dizzy with the enormity of it. Then, attracted by the golden glow of the big cylinder, the brute man forgot all else to investigate this new miracle. He was confident in his ability to deal with anything that arose now, and the shimmering beauty of the golden emanation intrigued him. He reached out tentatively. As the hirsute hand passed through the nimbus, a look of startled surprise appeared on the face of the tree-dweller. Then he collapsed. As a limp hand broke contact with the brilliance surrounding the spaceship, there was an almost perceptible crackle of energy, and for a moment the acrid pungence of ozone hung in the air.
The end. Do you want to know how you can help save more of the forgotten stories of futures past? Visit storiesoffuturespast.substack.com/about.